Second Chronicles 19. I think I got up to about here last week, so you're...
How many?
And Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, returned to his house in peace to Jerusalem. And Jehu, the son of Hanani, the seer, went out to meet him and said to King Jehoshaphat, "Shouldest thou help the ungodly and those that and love them that hate the Lord? Therefore is wrath come upon thee from before the Lord."
But there is some good in you, for you have removed the Asheroth from the land, and you have set your heart to seek God. So Jehoshaphat lived in Jerusalem and went out again among the people from Beersheba to the hill country of Ephraim and brought them back to the Lord, the God of their fathers.
And he sent judges in the land throughout all the fortified cities of Judah, city by city, and said to the judges, "Take heed what ye do, for ye judge not for man, but for the Lord, who is with you in the judgment."
Wherefore now, let the fear of the Lord be upon you. Take heed and do it. For there is no iniquity with the Lord our God, nor respect of persons, nor taking of gifts. Moreover, in Jerusalem did Jehoshaphat set the Levites and the priests and the chief of the fathers of Israel for the judgment of the Lord and the controversies when they returned to Jerusalem.
And he charged them, "Thus ye shall do in the fear of the Lord, in faithfulness, and with your whole heart. Whenever a case comes to you from your brothers who live in their cities, concerning bloodshed, law, or commandment, statutes, or rules, then ye shall warn them, that they may not incur guilt before the Lord, and wrath may not come upon you and your brothers. Thus you shall do, and you will not incur guilt."
And behold, Amariah the chief priest is over you in all matters of the Lord, and Zebediah the son of Ishmael, the ruler of the house of Judah, for all the king's matters. Also the Levites shall be officers before you. Deal courageously, and the Lord shall be with the good.
All right, thank you for reading that. So, last week we took a look at chapter 18, and this is when he joins an alliance with the wicked King Ahab. They go out to battle together, and then Ahab dies, and Jehoshaphat, by God's grace, makes it home alive. And as we saw last time, Jehoshaphat made a lot of bad decisions surrounding his choice to link himself with Ahab and go to battle. And at the end of the chapter last week, we looked at very quickly, but Ahab dies, but Jehoshaphat is also in a very dangerous situation. It talks about these commanders, they start closing in on him. He gets really scared, and he cries out to God. And God hears his prayer, and he actually delivers him in battle. And chapter 19, he's come home safe. Just a little lesson is no matter how many stupid choices you make and bad situations you put yourself in, don't forget to turn to God when you get there. And that's what happens with Jehoshaphat. He really does make some bad choices, and he gets into a bad situation, but God was merciful with him. And we kind of talked about this before, is when you read through Jehoshaphat's life, he's a guy that there's a lot of places where you look at what he does and what he says, and it's like, this is a really godly king who's really doing things that honors the Lord. And then there's other places where it's like he's making really bad choices, like what is he thinking? Why is he doing this? And that's kind of, I kind of mentioned when we're going through these classes, it's almost like a back and forth. So, next week, for example, God willing, if we continue in, we're going to read about his alliance with Jehoram, who is the son of Ahab. And so it's like does something good, something stupid, something good. And so that's just, and again, we can maybe relate to that in our own lives. We kind of struggle at times. And then he'll be delivered in class 7. Class 7 is going to be a good one. This is where he's in a very dangerous situation. He turns to the Lord. But then at the end of his life, he makes another alliance with one of Ahab's grandson, I guess, Ahaziah. And then we'll see the aftermath. So chapter 19, he's come back safely. And one of the first, what happens is we open up and we read about this guy by the name of Jehu, not to be confused with the Jehu who would be eventually king in the northern kingdom of Israel, but there's a prophet by the name of Jehu. And it says he's the son of Hanani. And here in 2 Chronicles 19, what Jehu does is he comes out and he rebukes Jehoshaphat for this alliance that he makes with the northern kingdom. And the way he expresses it, should you help the wicked and love those who hate the Lord? And it says, because of this, the wrath of God has come out, has gone out against you from the Lord. And so you think about Ahab, and Ahab was a very evil man. And it wasn't just that he wasn't a good man. It was like he actively persecuted God's prophets. In fact, when Jehoshaphat was in the northern kingdom and they were getting ready to go to battle, you have this prophet named Micaiah, and he gives a prophecy that Ahab doesn't like. So what does Ahab do? He throws him in prison, right? He's like, and you think you're kind of like, wait a minute, Jehoshaphat's sitting here watching this, and he decides to stay friends with this guy. He sees God's prophet. So at first it's like Jehoshaphat starts to sort of do the right thing. He insists, like, we need to inquire of the Lord. And so Ahab brings all these prophets. Well, they're not God's prophets. Like, is there anyone from the Lord we may inquire of? So he pushes a little bit more, and then he brings Micaiah, and so you think, okay, he's starting on the right path, but Micaiah says, you're going to lose. I saw Israel without a shepherd. It's like, this is not a good prophecy. They're not going to win. And Ahab gets mad, sends him into jail. And Jehoshaphat not only hears it's going to be a failure, but also sees this prophet go to jail, and he decides to stay in this alliance. And so, just some context of what he's being rebuked for here. It's like, you're helping those who hate the Lord. This guy is like doing these horrible things. It's not just somebody who maybe is an idol worshiper who doesn't know God. I mean, this is a guy who's actively persecuting God's prophets, and not just not just Ahab himself, but also his wife, Jezebel. They were very wicked, and they did some really horrible things, and Jehoshaphat should not have joined himself to them, and he's getting his rebuke for that. And just to look at this guy here in this chapter for a minute, it talks about a prophet by the name of Jehu, son of Hanani, and he's involved in a couple of different places. If you turn back real quick to 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 1. Now, someone wants to just read that for us. Actually, you know what? That's just talking about the reign of Baasha. It's, let me find it. I apologize. This should have been the passage where he actually, so 1 Kings chapter 1 is, Baasha is the king, but I want to find where, and I may need to move on from that because I may have missed that. Oh, I'm in 2 Kings. Okay, sorry. I was like, this is not right. It's my fault. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 1. Okay, that's the right one. 1 Kings chapter 16. Starting in verse 1, and if you want to read through verse 4, I don't know who's next. 1 Kings 16, verse 1 through 4.
The word of Yahweh came to Jehu the son of Hanani against Bathsheba, saying, because I have exalted you out of the dust and made you prince over my people Israel, and you have walked in the way of Jeroboam, and have made my people Israel to sin, to provoke me to anger with their sins. Behold, I will utterly sweep away Bathsheba and his house, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. The dogs will eat Bathsheba's descendants who die in the city, and he who dies of his in the field, the birds of the sky will eat.
So this king here, this is the guy who's king before the house of Omri, which is Ahab's father. Anyway, his household gets wiped out, but this is a northern king from Israel, And it says the same guy, this Jehu, son of Hanani, was the one who went up and prophesied against him. And if you flip back over to Chronicles, 2 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 7. And yeah, Second Chronicles 16, verse 7.
At that time, Hanani the seer came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you have relied on the king of Aram and have not relied on the Lord your God, therefore the army of the king of Aram has escaped out of your land, out of your hands.
Okay, so again, this is during Asa's reign. So this is Jehoshaphat's dad, and this. So Jehu is the son of Hanani. So there's a prophet named Hanani who prophesied to his father, and he's the one that rebukes him, and he's the one who actually tells him to all the bad things the Lord's going to do to him. But then if you look in verse 10, it says Asa was angry with the seer and put him in stocks in prison, for he was in a rage with him because of this. And then it says Asa inflicted cruelties on some of the people at that time. But Asa gets rebuked by the prophet, and he gets mad. And Asa had been this godly guy, but then towards the end of his life, he just hits into a real bad place. And we actually read that he gets so upset about this message, he puts the guy in jail. And so just for context, I think this tells a little bit about this guy Jehu. His dad preached against Jehoshaphat's dad, and he ended up in jail. So this took some bravery. I mean, I sometimes, you read about Jehoshaphat and he gets rebuked, and you're like, okay, that's nice. But, these prophets, they put their lives in their hands every time they do this. Because back in those days, there wasn't really anybody, humanly speaking, we know the Lord is above them, but humanly speaking, there wasn't anybody above a king. So if a king gets mad at you, there's nothing really stopping them from saying, you know what, off with his head. Some of these prophets are, very admired by the people. Like you think about John the Baptist, like Herod was afraid to do anything to him because of his, how much he was respected. So there's that to factor in, I suppose. But he really, it takes a lot of courage to do what they're doing here. So it's just a few verses, but this guy comes out against Jehoshaphat and really preaches against him. And,
Jason?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Jesus kind of picks up on this as he's constantly reminding the Pharisees. He's like, you're just like your dads that killed the prophets, right? Your fathers. And when you look at his trial, they basically make an alliance with Rome, really, don't they? They say to Pilate, you're no friend of Caesar if you let this guy go. And so they're making this alliance, and then they say, we have no king but Caesar, which was quite the statement.
Yeah, that's a good point. History has a way of repeating itself. But yeah, so these prophets come out, and the thing about Jehu, he gets mentioned one more time. It's in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 34. And 2 Chronicles 20, verse 34. And I can just read it real quick. It just says, now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat from the first to the last are written in the Chronicles of Jehu, son of Hanani, which are recorded in the book of the kings of Israel. So, there's debate, is Chronicles referring to kings? Is there some other annals out there? But in any case, this guy, not only was he a prophet, but it sounds like he was a scribe as well, which would have been a pretty influential position. So anyway, it's just a little background on this guy, Jehu, son of Hanani, that comes out. But the Lord's the one who sends him, and he rebukes him. And it's kind of interesting. One of the things that I read through, we don't have to look at these, we're just kind of looking real quickly. These are some of the different prophets that interact with Jehoshaphat during his life. We talk about Micaiah. He was in last week's chapter. He's the one who preached in front of Ahab and Jehoshaphat and told him about the impending defeat. God willing, next week we'll look at chapter 20, verse 14, a different prophet by the name of Jahaziel, is going to prophesy victory. He's eventually, Jehoshaphat's going to enter into a pact with Jehoram, and they're actually going to meet up with Elisha. And this is when they get stuck in another situation. They're without water, and they're in a bad place. And so he turns to the Lord, and Elisha actually gives them guidance on how to be victorious. And then again in 2 Chronicles 20, verse 37, towards the end of his life, he gets rebuked yet again for his alliance with Ahaziah, who was the son of Ahab. So prophets played a big part of Jehoshaphat's life. If you kind of put them all together, you see how many times these guys come out to speak to him. But one of the things that's interesting about Jehoshaphat's interaction with the prophets, unlike his father and unlike someone like Ahab, we never hear about him persecuting them. It's almost like he listens to these prophets. He actually takes what they say and he puts it into action. And for all his faults, this is one of the strong points about Jehoshaphat, is he does respect these prophets of the Lord. He does actually listen to what they say. And in the scripture, if you want to turn really quick to Proverbs chapter 9, it's just kind of a principle about this concept of how do you receive rebuke? And I'll just look at that really quick. Proverbs chapter 9. And if somebody doesn't mind, could they read Proverbs 9, verses 7 through 9 for us?
He who corrects his mother invites insult. He who reproves a wicked man invites abuse. Don't reprove a scoffer, lest he hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you.
One more verse, please.
Instruct a wise man, and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning.
Thank you for reading it. So, one of the things you see both here in Proverbs and in the examples we have of kings is one way to tell whether somebody's wise or foolish is how they respond to being criticized and rebuked. And Proverbs 9 says, if you rebuke someone who's wicked, you'll get yourself abuse. But if you reprove a wise man, he'll love you. And that's a very important principle. It's like, how do we receive that? Is it something we're resistant to or something we're open to? Yeah.
Raise your hand if you've known that to be true in real life.
Sure.
Just real quick too, if you go down to the next verse, that gives you an idea of who the wise men are. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. So if it's a person who is trying to follow after God, they're going to really appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And I guess in our practical lives with that too is that might not necessarily be the case at first. We sometimes have a habit of being defensive when somebody says something in the moment, but it's that planting that seed too. So just because we're nervous about saying something doesn't mean that we shouldn't help our brothers and sisters.
And you think about this from a king's perspective too, kind of like you're saying, our natural instinct is to be defensive, right? So this is a public thing. The whole nation is hearing about it. We're reading about this thousands of years later, right? So you're getting publicly rebuked by this guy as a king. And there's like face there, right? A king wants to save face. And some guy's up here telling him that you're doing something wrong. So I think it's important to point out that Jehoshaphat has some shortcomings, but this is something that really, to his credit, these prophets can come and rebuke him. Yes?
I was just going to say, rebuke is really, you really have to be very conscious whenever you have to serve rebuke to your brother. And then even under the best of circumstances, in my experience, brethren do not take rebuke well. Even though it should be blaringly obvious. And it's hard.
You're absolutely right. And I even in the work environment, like I'm in a place where I have to give feedback to people. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's, you did wrong on this, here's why. And the good employees, they take it and they learn from it. The bad ones, they don't. And this is very true in life. And when you find out a person's unwilling to take feedback and learn and admit their, okay, I made a mistake, I'll fix it, that person doesn't last very long. They don't do that. So, yeah. So I think there's a definite application, and not just as a king, but I think even on our everyday life on this principle. All right, so well, let's go ahead and turn back to 2 Chronicles chapter 20. We're going to kind of continue, I'm sorry, 19, 2 Chronicles chapter 19. And continue on in this. So he comes back, he gets rebuked, and then it does have another verse where it says in verse 4 that it says, and he went out among the people, and he brought them back to the Lord their God. Yeah.
Verse 4.
Oh, no, you don't have
have
to
a
read that,
comment.
sorry. We already read it together, but hang on to that. We might need that in a second here. But anyway, it talks about bringing the people back. And we kind of talked about this in chapter 17. You'll remember in chapter 17, remember he sends out all these teachers and these Levites into the land. So we won't dig into that too much, but it seems like he kind of did that and maybe things dropped off for a while, and now he's kind of reinvigorating because it mentions this again. But the next thing that he does is this appointment of judges in all the land of Israel. And this is the next big thing that happens, is this judicial reform. And if you have the mic, actually, if you don't mind turning over to Exodus chapter 18. And I think what we're going to see here is there's a lot of parallels between what Jehoshaphat does in Israel and some of the things you see both in the wilderness and instructions they're given in Deuteronomy. So Exodus chapter 18, and starting in verse 13, and if you don't mind reading to verse 22.
And it came to pass on the morrow that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood by Moses from the morning unto the evening. And when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he did to the people, he said, What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou self alone? And all the people stand by thee from morning until evening. And Moses said unto his father-in-law, Because the people come unto me to inquire of God. When they have a matter, they come unto me, and I judge between one and another, and I do make them know the status of God and his laws. And Moses' father-in-law said unto him, The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away, but thou and this people that is with thee, for this thing is too heavy for thee. Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone. Hearken unto my voice, I will give thee counsel, and God shall be with thee. Be thou for the people to Godward, that thou mayest bring the causes unto God. And thou shalt teach them ordinances and laws, and shalt show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Moreover, thou shalt provide out of all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands and rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, rulers of 10s. And let them judge the people at all seasons. And it shall be that every great matter they bring unto thee, but every small matter they shall judge. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they shall bear the burden with thee.
All right, thank you for reading that. So, we're back in the wilderness, and Moses is the judge for the people, and his father-in-law Jethro comes out, and he sees him basically judging everybody, and he's doing it all himself, and he's like, you're going to wear yourself out. So he gives him this guidance. He says, you need to find people out of the able men, is my verse, and I think Corinne said hate covetousness. Mine says hate a bribe. Why is that so important in this role as a judge, right? If a judge likes bribes, it's not going to be a justice system, will it? It's just going to be corrupted, and things will break down pretty quickly. So it's very important that you have honest people in these roles.
So
yes.
This is the way the kingdom's going to be set up, right? Moses is playing Christ here, and the saints are these wise people.
Yep.
So.
I'm going to like to swing around back to that, but that's a very important point, because when you're kind of studying some of these kings and what's a good king and bad king, you're kind of learning about Jesus too, right? Because we're looking for him to be a king. And what you'll see is some of these character traits are called out in Christ. But remember the Apostle Paul in Corinthians, he gets mad at the Corinthians because they're taking each other to court in front of Gentiles. And he's like, don't you have anybody who can do this within your own community? Yeah, Brother Nicholas.
I think this is really important to see both in our normal day-to-day lives, but in our community too, that it's important to be able to have, you need to be able to trust somebody if you're in a place of power to say, I'm going to give some power to you, whoever that may be, and to be able to let go too, but to also see those people that can help and participating. I know at Great Lakes, we're always trying to find people just that want to participate a little bit, even if it's just, hey, just one afternoon you go help the kids do this activity, then those people feel that they're part of that community. And you see Jesus did that too. He didn't just go all by himself. He had 12 disciples plus all sorts of other people that we don't really hear a lot about, because that's how humans and any sort of creature, animals do this too. They need that community to delegate the tasks back and forth and to help and to be able to give up some of what they have. But I think this is a great, and you see it, the kings that did this well, did well. The kings that didn't do this or listened to the wrong people, or they didn't do well. And it's a very black and white. There's not a lot of, if you involve your community, things will go well, pretty much at the end of the day.
Yeah.
A great example of that is it Rehoboam, when he listens to the young counselors instead of the old ones?
I was just thinking two things based on what Nicholas said. Building that sense of community, and John and I are far from perfect on this, but when we're asked to do something in the household, we try really hard not to say no, to get involved, to do the things, to help out. And I think part of that is training our children to be the same, train them young to hopefully get involved, do that evening activity, do something to keep you involved. And the other point was Jethro was listened to. Moses didn't ignore the advice. He took the constructive criticism and he went forward with that.
Another example of a good leader listening to rebuke. It's a sign of wisdom. But yeah, that's a good thing. You think about it on the ecclesial level, and some of the same principles. I mean, they want, able men, honest men, and our people. You can say people because eventually Deborah was a judge too, right? But these principles are important. And you think about it in the ecclesial world, like you go online and you look at like ex-Christadelphians, and a lot of them, they're angry because something happened in their life, and they went to their ecclesia for support, and instead of getting support, they got, at least from their perspective, again, there may be more sides of the story, but when you hear it over and over again, it's like maybe there's some problem somewhere, even in our community, where we don't think about this enough. Like, be ready for these things.
And something else to think about is that I see, and I'm a worrier by nature, and that's something I have to really work on, but you look around and you see in many different ecclesias or at Bible schools, it's the same people speaking at different Bible schools. It's the same people doing this and this and this and this, all in their one ecclesia. We need more people to be involved so that there isn't the burnout of the handful that are doing so much.
All right. If you want to flip over to Deuteronomy really quick, it gives kind of piggybacks on what we just read, but actually gives some of the guidelines for people who are going to be the judges. So Deuteronomy chapter 16. And it's going to be verses 18 through 20. And I guess it's up there. You can see that and read it or turn to the spot.
It's all up there in the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
You shall appoint judges and officers in all your towns that the Lord your God is giving you, according to your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not pervert justice, you shall not show partiality, and you shall not accept a bribe. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and subverts the cause of the righteous. Justice, and only justice, you shall follow, that you may live and inherit the land that the Lord your God is giving you.
So this passage is kind of reiterating and really giving some guiding principles to this. And it talks about, you shall not pervert justice, you shall not show partiality, not accepting a bribe. says the bribe blinds an eye. But verse 20 says, justice and only justice shall you follow. And it's kind of interesting. There have been some judges that have Jewish backgrounds, and a lot of them quote this passage, Deuteronomy 16, verse 20, is kind of their guiding principle. And I just found that was interesting. And I think in the Hebrew, it doesn't say justice and only justice. I think it repeats the word twice. This is justice, justice you should follow is what I read somewhere. But just how important that concept of justice is in God's society.
Guess what sticks out to me in both of these passages, that they're to be appointed, not to be elected. I think that's because whenever, the personality types, the people pleaser type is maybe one of the four or whatever. Pleaser types elect people pleaser types.
Mm-hmm.
So this actually kind of subverts that. The only problem is that you have to have a wise person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good point. I know in the United States there's a big debate about how to get judges in place. There's some that are actually elected directly and some that are appointed, and there's a lot of debate which is better. But yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, so this is an important part of, and if you go back and just kind of look at what Jehoshaphat does, and you'll kind of see that he gives them very similar advice. Deuteronomy, 2nd Chronicles, chapter 19. And his advice, again, we've already read it, but it says, thus you shall do in the fear of the Lord in faithfulness and with a whole heart. And, he's just teaching them the same thing, that they should do this work, but they should do it in a way that honors God, and they should fear the Lord. Why do you think in Deuteronomy that it calls out, it doesn't actually, I'm thinking of a different verse. Never mind. I'm ahead of myself. So anyway, so this talks about the importance of justice, but so I guess we'll just kind of wrap up. We'll look at Chronicles, and it's kind of, or not Chronicles, we'll look at Proverbs, but it's interesting. A lot of people think Proverbs was originally written as a guide for either kings or kings and rulers and people like that. And you'll see a lot of this is in Proverbs. We'll just look at a handful of verses towards the end. So somebody wants to turn to Proverbs chapter 20. I just picked out a few verses, but really this is a big part of Proverbs, is just how to apply justice. Proverbs chapter 20. And someone wants to read verse 8 for us.
A king who sits on the throne of judgment winnows all evil with his eyes.
Okay, so what does that expression mean? He winnows all evil. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I just have to think about what something means, because we don't do much winnowing today, right? So what does that mean? Back then, you're like separating the good from the evil, and that takes discretion, and that's what they need to do.
The way this works is pretty neat, because in order to be in the king's sphere of influence, you really have to work hard to keep yourself without spot and blemish, because the advisors that he's setting up, a good king, requires righteous people to be around him, and doing so sort of sets yourself up for success, doesn't it? Because you look at the bad kings in Scripture, and they always set themselves up with wicked people around them, and the wickedness just spreads like wildfire.
Mm-hmm. And that's true of like kings, and in the humanly speaking, like the ones we remember are the ones that leave these lasting legal legacies, like Justinian. He only reigned for a short while compared to human history, but the code of Justinian is like lived on. And then you had Napoleon took a lot of that, and he got big real quick and then kind of disappeared. But the Napoleonic code is still being used in Europe, and even I think in like New Orleans or something.
You are the sum of your three closest friends.
Yeah, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're running out of time here, but this is, anyway, Jehoshaphat ends this chapter on a good note. You know, he's introducing this justice system, and he's making sure that the people are taken care of. But this is, we're not giving it probably justice, but justice is a very important subject in the Bible, and we see that as a good king, he makes that a priority to make sure that people are taken care of. So God willing, we'll pick up next week, and he's going to enter into another bad alliance. So I will wrap it up there.